Letters to Saleem. Saleem Kunam Katut. Our History. By G. A. Parwez. Letter number 39. Translated by Dr. Suhail Alam. In the last letter, Saleem, you saw glittering gems of our past accomplishments strewn amongst the pages first-century Islamic history. However, my great regret is that our pages of history are not only a collection of glittering gems. Also included in those pages are such vile accounts that one feels great embarrassment in associating them with that blessed era, and one's face lowers to the ground in shame. The truth is that history is a powerful double-edged sword. If a nation has its true past history, then it is better able to be successful in the present and perspective in the future. But if all it has is a mutilated version of its history, then that nation will become so entangled in past mistakes and misunderstandings that freeing itself from that obscure darkness will be extremely difficult. This is what has happened to us. Amongst the reasons for our decline, our corrupted history is an important element. With us is the Book of Allah, upon which we all have iman, conviction. Based on fact and understanding, we believe that it is a constitution that covers life's every corner and is sufficient to establish nourishment in an all-encompassing manner for all time to come. If we truly follow it, we can become the most successful of nations. But obviously, the Quran can only provide this benefit and nourishment if we understand it correctly. The biggest obstacle in our understanding of the Quran, however, is our mutilated and corrupted history. Perhaps this statement startles and bewilders you, but when all the facts are presented, you will accept the truth of this statement without hesitation. But before I give you any examples of this, I find it necessary to make some introductory remarks that explain how corrupted history can become such a massive barrier to the proper understanding of the Quran. In the system the Quran illustrates for us, it characterizes its citizens, mu'mineen, as
وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ.
They spend and make available to others whatever Allah grants them of His bounty. 2-3. The Quran also clarifies to what extent their personal wealth should be made open to others by stating,
وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ.
O Prophet, they ask you what they should give. The Mu'mineen asked how much personal wealth should be given to the other members of Islam, to foster universal growth and nourishment. The answer was,
قُلِ الْعَفْوَ.
Tell them, whatever is left over after your necessities are taken care of. 2-19. In other words, after you deal with your own expenses, give everything that remains. Clearly, these verses order the citizens of the Islamic system to keep only that much of their hard work's pay as they needed. The rest would go to the Quranic system, Islamic government, which would then spend the collected wealth to equally spread nourishment to all citizens of Islam. There is no difficulty in understanding the concepts of the above verses, nor is there any doubt or ambiguity in them. But if you take these concepts and verses and present them to someone, the usual response is that so-and-so Sahaba, companion of the Prophet, used to have over 100,000 dinars and dirhams, another had piles of silver and gold, and another had caravan upon caravan filled with goods of trade. So if no one was allowed to keep more wealth than his personal needs required, then why did these blessed souls amass so much wealth? Then, the conversation usually takes a turn like this. Question: tell me, did the Sahaba understand the Quran properly, or do you claim to understand it better than they did? Answer: I could never say that I understand the Quran better than the Sahaba did. Question: tell me, did the Sahaba live their life according to the Quran, or did they act against its commands? Answer: Na'ayatha billah. How could I ever claim that their actions were against the Quran? Their lives were totally in accordance with its teachings. Question: well, if their lives were in accordance with the Quran, and if they had so much wealth and money in their possession, then how can you claim that according to the Quran, extra wealth cannot remain within the possession of individuals? And at this point, you no longer have an answer to their questions. Observers of this conversation will also become satisfied and side with the other person, nodding their heads and claiming what he's saying is absolutely right. If the blessed Sahaba had so much wealth and money, then how can it be said that accumulating wealth is against Islam? How dare someone claim that the Sahaba did not even understand this little Quran? Did you see, Saleem, how history can stand in the path of the Quran? You will be shocked to know that the current Islam is mostly based on an arrangement of historical accounts, the greater part of which are against the Quran. Go and ask for the proof or sanad on any topic in our current Islam. That proof or sanad will often be provided through history, and if you request a proof based on the Quran, the response will be, "We are presenting the history and sayings of the Prophet and the Sahaba as our evidence." What can be a greater proof than this in Islam? These items are critical in our ability to understand the Quran. Without them, the Quran cannot be understood. This response is so silencing that you cannot say anything in reply. The result is that history became the source of proof in Islam, and the Quran is left merely as a token, to be read as a virtuous deed. If it ever happens that a certain historical precedent concurs with Quranic teaching, then this agreement is proudly displayed. But if it ever happens that the two items contradict, the limelight is shown upon history while the Quran is thrust into the shadows. The true position of history. Until we understand the true positions of the Quran and of history and use them accordingly, Islam will not be established in its true form. So Saleem, let us investigate this matter. Every single word of the Quran has come to us in its totally preserved state. There is no room for doubt or disagreement. But as for history, whether it comes from books of hadith or from other sources, neither the Prophet arranged it and gave it to the Ummah, nor did the rightly guided caliphs, Khalifa ar-Rashidun, arrange it, nor was any historical work compiled during the life of any Sahaba. The book of hadith, which is called the most correct book after the book of Allah, that is Sahih al-Bukhari, was not compiled until around 250 years after the death of the Prophet. At that time, there wasn't even a written record from which these books of hadith or history were compiled. Mostly, they merely consisted of verbal accounts that were heard from the contemporary Muslims of Bukhari's time. This is the position of the first history books, from which we derive our knowledge about the life of the Prophet and the lives of the Sahaba. Keep in mind that a large part of the Prophet's life and the characteristics of the Sahaba are also contained within the Quran. But at this time, we are only talking about the history that has been written in other books. Based on the positions of the Quran and history/hadith described above, every sound-minded individual will conclude that when a contradiction is discovered between the accounts of the Quran and the history regarding the blessed period of the Prophet and those with him, then the Quran should be considered correct and that part of written history should be considered false. This is one of those obvious truths that should not even require proof. It is its own proof. Even for those accounts about which the Quran remains silent, we still have some working principles. 1. Our Iman, according to the Quran, is that the Prophet and his companions lived their lives exactly according to the Quran. 2. Therefore, if history presents us with any account regarding the Prophet or the companions in which they are shown to disobey the Quran, we should without hesitation declare that historical account is false. This way, the true ideology of Islam will be preserved, and the history of the Prophet and the companions will remain pure and be for us in its true form, whereas accepting such accounts not only allows corruption of history, but also of our Islamic ideals. Whatever I have said above will not become totally clear until I present an example from history. Many examples can be given from the records of the Prophets and his companions' lives, but since there is not enough room in this letter, one could write endlessly on the topic. I think one example should suffice. This event relates to all the Sahaba that were in Medina at the time the Prophet took his last breath in this world, and his body had not even been buried yet. First, let's review some basic Quranic principles. The Quran's unchangeable words state that,
وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ.
Truly we have made mankind worthy of respect. 1770. That by merely being a human, one deserves respect. The rich and the poor, the powerful and the weak, regardless of nationality, family, status or religion, every human deserves respect. Secondly, as far as distinction amongst human beings, the principle is,
وَلِكُلٍّ دَرَجَاتٌ مِمَّا عَمِلُوا.
Everyone's distinction will be made according to their deeds. 46:19. In other words, their levels will be determined according to their personality and their actions. Again, family heritage and ties, tribes, caste, wealth, etc., will not be used to distinguish people. Thirdly, based on this very principle, it follows that the one most worthy of respect in the nation is he whose lifestyle and character are most concordant with Allah's laws.
إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ.
Truly the most honored of you is the one who is the most righteous of you. 49:13. With this unchangeable eternal ideal, the Quran clearly wiped out distinctions based on color, race, blood, family, tribes, caste, etc., and kept only one criterion for distinction amongst human beings, namely, the beauty of character and actions. The duty of the nation. Now let's move on. The Prophet brought into shape a society based upon the principles of the Quran, a government whose purpose in this world was to invite to the good, and prohibit the evil. This society was to continue even after the Prophet's demise, since Islam is to be the system of life for all time. The entire nation had to be established with the same goals and purposes. And regarding that nation, the Quran declares,
كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر.
You are the best nation on earth. Your duty is to order the good and prohibit the evil. 3109. This is the same nation that was chosen to inherit the Book of Allah. It says in the Quran,
ثم أورثنا الكتاب الذين اصطفينا من عبادنا.
Then we made those people inheritors of the book, from whom we had chosen people for this ultimate goal. 3532. This nation, in those days, consisted of the Muhajirin, migrants from Mecca, and the Ansar, natives of Medina. Allah himself describes their loyalty and faith in the Quran.
والذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله والذين آووا ونصروا أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم مغفرة ورزق كريم.
And those who had Iman and migrated and did jihad in the way of Allah, Muhajirin, and those who had sheltered and helped them, Ansar, these are true and steadfast believers. And for them is every kind of protection and provision. 874.
وألف بين قلوبهم لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم ولكن الله ألف بينهم إنه عزيز حكيم.
In another place, Allah claims that He gave them mutual love for each other, which Allah Himself describes as something even the entire wealth of the world could not purchase. 863. The description of these true believers provided in Surah Fath is a living testament to their high regard. Read carefully how these people joyfully exclaimed,
محمد رسول الله والذين معه أشداء على الكفار رحماء بينهم تراهم ركعا سجدا يبتغون فضلا من الله ورضوانا سيماهم في وجوههم من أثر السجود ذلك مثلهم في التوراة ومثلهم في الإنجيل كزرع أخرج شطأه فآزره فاستغلظ فاستوى على سوقه يعجب زراعا ليغيظ بهم الكفار وعد الله الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات منهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما.
Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and those who are with him are strong against the unbelievers, but compassionate amongst each other. You will see them bow and prostrate themselves in prayer, seeking grace from Allah and His good pleasure. On their faces are their marks of humility, being the traces of their prostration. This is their similitude in the Torah, and their similitude in the Gospel is like a seed which sends forth its blade, then makes it strong, it then becomes thick and it stands on its own stem, filling the sowers with wonder and delight. As a result, it fills the disbelievers with rage at them. Allah has promised those among them who believe and do righteous deeds forgiveness, and a great reward. 4829. The Prophet and his companions, what a fascinating group. Against the disbelievers they are as firm and solid as the mountains, but with each other they are very warm-hearted and understanding. Always ready to carry the weight of their responsibilities, how willfully they accept the laws of Allah. But they are not like a group of rabbinic monks either. According to Allah's laws, they are also busy in searching for the necessities of life and knowledge in every field of life. They remain balanced and develop within themselves the characteristics that Allah asks of them. Their faces clearly show the peace and tranquility achieved by their Iman and righteous deeds. These characteristics were described in the Torah as well as the Injil. The metaphor of the way they established that divine system is that of a precious seed, which when planted gives rise to a blossom whose first shoot is very tender. In time, its strength increases until it stands firm and stable on its own trunk or stem, and its branches finally yield fruits. This is the way Allah promises any group who takes action and implements Allah's divine program of life with deep conviction in the truth of its unseen results, that the tiny and tender seed of their actions will remain safe from all dangers and their fields will be filled with the best fruits. The first group of believers was personally trained by the Prophet. However, after his death, it was the duty of the entire nation to perpetuate the Quranic system. For this end, the Quran describes true believers as always carrying out their affairs after mutual consultation.
وأمرهم شورى بينهم.
And they conduct their affairs with mutual consultation. 4238. Now Saleem, the above clarifications make it clear that 1. The criteria for respect and recognition is beauty of character and righteous actions. 2. The Sahaba were true and steadfast believers. Their lives were very righteous and their characters very pure. They had undying love for each other in their hearts. 3. To establish and continue the Quranic system is the collective duty of the nation. For this end, they should implement mutual consultation, for example in selecting from amongst their best citizens, best by the criteria described above, who should be the leader after the Prophet, in other words, the Khalifa. The first opportunity for the nation to act upon these principles came at the time of the Prophet's death. Well, these are the teachings of the Quran and the characteristics of the Sahaba, Muhajirin and Ansar. Now let's see what history has to tell us about this chapter in Islam. Ali and Abbas's, Rahmatullah Alai, ideas about the Caliphate. In Bukhari, chapter 57, Book of al-Maghazi, the following account is narrated by Abdullah ibn Abbas. When the Prophet was afflicted with the sickness that led to his death, Ali was coming out of the Prophet's quarters that morning. The people asked Ali, "O Ali, how is the Prophet's health this morning?" Ali replied, "The Prophet has recovered by the grace of Allah." Then Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib took Allah's hand and pulled him aside and said to him, "By Allah, after 3 days you will be ruled by someone else, and by Allah, I feel that Allah's messenger will die from this ailment, for I know how the faces of the offspring of Abdul Muttalib look at the time of their death. So let us go to Allah's messenger and ask him who will take over the caliphate. If it is given to us, we will know as to it, and if it is given to somebody else, we will inform him so that he may tell the new ruler to take care of us." Ali said, "By Allah, if we asked Allah's messenger for it, and he refused to give it to us, the people will never give it to us after that. And by Allah, I will not ask Allah's messenger for it." Sahih al-Bukhari, the Book of al-Maghazi, 57-1707. Can you believe it, Saleem? This account claims the Prophet had not even died, yet his uncle and nephew/son-in-law began having thoughts of how to take control of the caliphate. Ali was confident that the caliphate would surely be his, but Abbas felt otherwise. That is why he wanted to take Ali to the Prophet and confirm that indeed the caliphate would be given to Ali. The response that Ali gave to Abba's request is worthy of reflection. If he went to the Prophet and requested the caliphate and the Prophet refused, then he would not have any chance of getting it. Did you know, Saleem, that Shias believe that Allah, through his divine process, bestows prophethood and caliphate to whom he wills, without room for election or consultation? There is no question of choosing a Khalifa. He is considered to be divinely chosen and commissioned by Allah himself, called Imam by Shias. They believe this imamate was given to Ali and his descendants. But Sunnis, however, do not believe this. They believe that the Khalifa is chosen by mutual consultation. The caliphate is not property to be distributed to one's relatives after one's death. A leadership passed down from father to son would be a monarchy, one of the things Islam was meant to abolish. If we consider this account to be true, then surprisingly, the above narration is not from Shias, rather it is from the most respected Sunni book of Hadith. Now think, if we consider this account to be true, then what kind of impression do we get regarding two of the Prophet's closest companions, Ali and Abbas? The impression is that, God forbid, they did not even understand some of Islam's most basic and fundamental principles, that the caliphate is not received on the basis of inheritance or as a claim or right. This matter is decided based on mutual consultation of the entire nation. There is no need to explain what kind of damage is done to Allah's character by the story that is being ascribed to him. Now let's move forward. The blessed Prophet passed away. Because the caliphate was to be decided by the mutual consultation of the whole nation, the Prophet did not leave any will or wishes regarding the matter. This way, the free will of the nation would not be bound or constrained by anything. This matter was of utmost importance. One cannot even conceptualize the Islamic system without a central government. That is why even before the funeral rites were done, they thought it necessary to deal with that matter first. History tells us that within the courtyard of Saqif Bani Saida was a group of Ansar of whom Sa'd ibn Ubadah was vying for the Caliphate. One account reports that some believed that one leader should be chosen from the Ansar, and another should be chosen from the Muhajirin. At that time, the Muhajirin, including Abu Bakr, Umar, and various other Sahaba, arrived. The details of that meeting according to history, are worthy of reflection. It is said that Habib ibn Munzir gave the following speech. O Ansar! Keep the leadership in your own hands so that people remain obedient to you. No one will even have the guts to speak against you or to do something against your wishes. You are worthy of both respect and riches. You are superior to others in both experience and number. You are courageous and brave. People look up to you. At this time, don't spoil your opportunity by arguing amongst yourselves. These people, Muhajirin, will be forced to accept your demands. The most we can compromise with them is that one wealthy among us will rule with one wealthy among them. Abid Hussain Hakel's book Abu Bakr Siddiq Akbar, page 107. Are you getting the picture, Saleem? This historical account is regarding those very Ansar whom Allah himself declares as being totally selfless and considerate towards the Muhajirin. Yet according to history, these selfish emotions and words came from them at a time when the Prophet's blessed corpse was still in front of their eyes. Now that was in regards to the Ansar. Now listen to what the Muhajirin had to say. History tells us that in response, Umar made the following comments. Umar's speech. 2 swords cannot fit into one sheath. By Allah, our tribes will never agree to make you the leader when the Prophet had not come from you. But if the leadership is given to someone who is of the people from whom the Prophet came, then we will have no objections. And if any Arab denies our leadership and Khilafat, then we can present clear proofs and evidences to refute him. Who can dare quarrel with us regarding it when we were the most devoted and closest in family to him? In this matter, anyone disputing us must be one who follows evil, polluted with sins and ready to fall into a pit of destruction. Abu Bakr Siddiq by Hakel, page 108. In response to this, Habib says, O Ansar! Be strong and don't be persuaded by Umar and his crew. If you show weakness now, then your portion of the kingdom will be snatched away from you. If they oppose you, then exile them and take the kingdom for yourselves. Because, by Allah, you are the most worthy of it. It was by your swords that Islam was blessed with power and success. You are the ones who brought it dignity and respect. It is you who gave Islam shelter and demonstrated your allegiance to it. And if you wish, you can also take back the power and honor you gave it. Abu Bakr Siddiq, Hakel, 108-109. Manner of speaking? Umar, after hearing this, then exclaims, If you attempt something like this, then Allah will destroy you. Page 109. In response to this, Habib claims, Not us, Allah will destroy you. Page 109. Saleem, what kind of impression are you given regarding the mutual affairs of our Sahaba? Those, regarding whom Allah describes as, Ashidu ala kafare, are Ohameo bainam. With the disbelievers, they are very stern and strong, while with each other they are extremely sympathetic. They, about whom Allah's words claim wa alafa baina kalubihim. 864. Allah has put mutual love and affection in their hearts, the kind of love and affection that even the entire world's wealth cannot purchase. But our history presents an altogether different picture of the character and state of mutual relations between the Sahaba. In the above excerpts from history, Umar gave the proof of the Muhajirin's authority on the Khilafat by claiming, Who can dare quarrel with us regarding it when we were the most devoted and closest in family to him? These words are worthy of scrutiny. You have already seen what history ascribes to Abbas and Ali, claiming that they believed that the Khilafat should go by inheritance to those closest in family to the Prophet. As for Umar, we are told that he too used that to prove his claim. But think, Saleem, by telling us all this, where is this history leading us? But this history does not rest here. It goes one step further and claims that when the debate became even more heated, Abu Bakr stood up and said that the Ansar's claims were completely baseless. The Prophet has already decided the matter by claiming Alaimatum min Quraysh, the leaders will be from the Quraysh. After hearing this, the Ansar became silent and Abu Bakr was given the Khilafat. This hadith is unanimously considered to be authentic, but has anyone bothered to deeply consider whether these could truly be the words of our Prophet? The Quran continuously discourages man-made distinctions based on blood and family, and continuously espouses the equality of humanity and the respect of mankind. The Prophet's entire life was also a practical reflection of these basic ideals and understanding. Can you even imagine that the proponent of such ideals could say that the caliphate will remain only in my tribe? This single example is enough to support those who claim the Quran's teachings and the Prophet's example are not righteous. But we still ascribe the saying to our Prophet, and that Abu Bakr openly used this quote as proof to his claim, in front of the collection of Ansar and Muhajirin, and everyone accepted it. In other words, by just one account, our history was able to ascribe the very same ancestor worship that the Quran had come to eradicate to the Prophet and his companions. Are you still with me, Saleem? See how our history has painted a rather disgraceful picture of our blessed Sahaba, Ansar and Muhajirin, even in their first meeting after the Prophet's death? Can you believe the shameful condition of mutual relations, manner of speaking, and style of reasoning? Now let's move forward. In his history, Imam Tabari writes, Abdullah ibn Abd narrates that everyone came to pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr, to the point that Sa'd was about to be trampled by the crowd. One of Sa'd's men began shouting for help, but Umar yelled, "May Allah destroy him!" wishing him to be killed, and eventually went and stood over Sa'd, exclaiming that he wished to trample and kill him. Sa'd grabbed hold of Umar's beard. Umar shouted for him to let go, and that if even one hair was out of place, not one tooth would remain in Sa'd's mouth. Abu Bakr then intervened, silencing Umar and claiming that at this time, tenderness would be more prudent and beneficial. Umar then let go of Sa'd. Sa'd then claimed that as long as the strength to stand remains in him, he would fill the streets and alleys of Medina with his own supporters such that Umar and his followers would be left bewildered. And by Allah, at that time I would hand you over to such a nation that wouldn't listen to me, rather I would follow them. He then asked his men to pick him up and take him home. His men came and took him home. For a few days he was not bothered at all. Then he was summoned and told that since everyone including his own supporters had now pledged their allegiance, he should as well. He adamantly refused, claiming that he would not join them until his family and remaining followers and even his last arrow was spent in opposing them, and his swords and spears were colored with their blood. He declared by Allah, that if along with the humans even the jinn pledged their allegiance to Abu Bakr, even then he would not. Tariq Tabari, Volume 1. Now if we continue to the next page, we read that Ma'azallah. Dahak ibn Khalifa narrates that at the occasion of the selection of the Khalifa, Habib ibn al-Mundhir stood up and unsheathed his sword and exclaimed, "I will immediately settle this problem. I am a lion, I am on a lion's mountain, and I am a lion's son." Umar then attacked him. Habib's hand was wounded and his sword fell. Umar picked up the sword, and then jumped on Sa'd. Others joined him and jumped on Sa'd as well. Abu Bakr remained aloof from this. When people started jumping on Sa'd, someone shouted that you people have killed Sa'd. Umar then cursed him, asking Allah to destroy him, declaring him a hypocrite. As Umar was about to strike him, a stone came in the way of his sword and his attack was thwarted. After this, everyone came one by one to pledge their allegiance to Abu Bakr, including Sa'd. At this time, bickering and quarreling began, portraying a sight reminiscent of the days of ignorance, Jahiliyyah. Ma'azallah. Saleem, read that line again, where it actually says. Bickering and quarreling began, portraying a sight reminiscent of the days of ignorance, Jahiliyyah. God forbid. Anyway, Abu Bakr was selected as the Khalifa. But whatever happened to Sa'd, the other hopeful? Listen to this. After this, Sa'd neither prayed with Abu Bakr whether he was leading prayer or not. Even during Hajj, he would not offer the rites if Abu Bakr was there. And until the death of Abu Bakr, he continued with these practices. Tabari, page 8. We have seen above that Sa'd pulled on Umar's beard. The history of Tabari tells us that the pulling of beards had actually, God forbid, become commonplace for these men. For example, in the same volume from which the above quotes were taken, is an account of the disagreement between Umar and Abu Bakr regarding Usama ibn Zaid. Abu Bakr, who was sitting, became enraged, and sprang upon Umar and grabbed his beard. O Ibn al-Khattab! May Allah do badly with your mother that you may die. You tell me to remove that person whom the Prophet himself appointed as the army's leader? Tabari, page 12. Well, that was just an aside. Now let's return to the colorful story of the selection of the first Khalifa. In this entire episode, no mention of Ali has yet been made. You must be restless to find out what his reaction was. After all, it was he who first had the ambition for the Caliphate. History has much to tell us about this. Listen to what Abid Hussain Hakel, Misri, writes in his book. A few Muhajirin and Ansar did not pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr. Their support was for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Well known amongst them were Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, Fazal ibn Abbas, Zubair ibn Awam, Ibn Elis, Khalid ibn Said, Miqdar ibn Umar, Salman Farsi, Abu Dharr Ghafari, Ammar ibn Yasir, Bara ibn Azib, Ibn Ka'b. Abu Bakr had counsel with Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah and Mughira ibn Shobieh regarding what to do about Ali. They told him to meet with Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib and give them a portion of the caliphate that will carry on in his family. In this way, we can cause an argument and fight between Ali and Abbas, which will be a great benefit to you against Ali. According to this advice, Abu Bakr met with Abbas and had a long talk with him. Abu Bakr said, "You are the uncle of the Prophet, and I want that you also have a part in the caliphate, which after you, will pass down in your family." However, Abbas rejected the offer and claimed that if the caliphate is our right, then we will not settle for only a part of it. Abu Bakr, page 119. After this, Hakel writes. In another relation that Yaqubi and some other historians have mentioned, we are told that in hopes of pledging allegiance to Ali, a group of Ansar and Muhajirin went to the house of Fatima Azizara bint Rasul. Caliph ibn Sa'id was amongst them. Khalid said to Ali that I swear by Allah, there is no better man to succeed the Prophet than you. So please accept our pledges of allegiance. When Abu Bakr and Umar heard of this gathering, they took a few men and went to Fatima's house and attacked it. Ali, with sword in hand, came out of his house. His first encounter was with Umar. Umar broke Ali's sword, and then taking some men, entered Ali's house. At this, Fatima came out of the house and said, "Get out of my house, or else by Allah, I will pull out my hair. And I will ask for help against you from Allah." Hearing these words from Fatima, everyone left her house. For some days, the Sahaba mentioned above continued to resist pledging allegiance to Abu Bakr. But eventually, one by one, each one accepted Abu Bakr's pledge except for Ali, who did not do so for 6 or 7 months. It was only after the death of Fatima that he did so. Until now, we have not discussed what Ali's reasons were for his position regarding this issue. Hakel writes. The most famous narration regarding the refusal of Ali and a few of Bani Hashim's people to pledge is found in Ibn Qutayba's book Al-Imama wa Siyasa. The narration states that after pledging allegiance to Abu Bakr, Umar and a few men went to meet with Bani Hashim, who at the time were gathered at Ali's house. He wanted to ask them to pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr, but everyone rejected his request. Zubair ibn Awam even took out his sword and stepped forward to confront Umar. Seeing this, Umar told his comrades to seize Zubair. Umar's men caught him and took his sword and forced him to pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr. Ali was also asked to pledge. However, he too refused and claimed, "I am not going to pledge allegiance because I am more worthy of the caliphate than Abu Bakr. Instead, you all should pledge allegiance to me." You refused to pledge allegiance to any Ansar claiming that you were closer to the Prophet, and only those close to the Prophet should hold the caliphate. According to this principle, you should have handed over the caliphate over to me, but instead you stole the caliphate from the Al-Bayt, Prophet's family, and usurped it for yourselves. Didn't you present this proof to the Ansar? That because the Prophet was from amongst you, you were more worthy of the caliphate and that they should follow you? That same argument you confronted the Ansar with, I now confront you with. I am more close to the Prophet than any of you were, therefore, the caliphate is my right. If you have the least bit of Iman in you, then do justice and follow me. But if you want to be tyrants, then do whatever you wish. Abu Bakr Siddiq, page 122. Just reflect on that, Saleem. How the same proof accredited to Abu Bakr and Umar, that the caliphate should stay in the Quraysh tribe because they were closer in relation to him, is now ascribed to Ali as well. None can fault the reasoning of Ali, who uses the same evidence used by Abu Bakr and Umar in order to claim his right to the caliphate. This is the whole basis of the never-ending Shia-Sunni debate. Truth be told, given narrations like the one above, the Sunnis' position becomes so weak that they cannot provide any satisfying answer to the Shia's objection. History has attached that reasoning to the very first and greatest caliphs, Abu Bakr and Umar. Anyway, in response to Ali's argument, Umar merely claimed, "I am not going to let you go until you pledge your allegiance." Abu Bakr Siddiq, page 122. Ali then pointedly remarked, "Umar, you eagerly milk the cow when part of that milk is going to be yours. You now ate Abu Bakr's khilafat today so that you can take it for yourself tomorrow. But I will never pledge my allegiance to him." Abu Bakr at this point began worrying that this tense matter would escalate in progress to a battle of harsh words. He then said, "Ali, if you do not want to pledge allegiance, then I will also not force you into it." At this, Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah turned his attention towards Ali and with the kindest words possible said, "Nephew, you are still young and these people are older. Neither are you experienced as they are, nor are you yet as broad-minded. If there is one person in our nation successfully able to handle the duty of succeeding the Prophet, then that person can only be Abu Bakr. So, accept his khilafat. If you live a long life, then your knowledge, level of religion, intelligence and understanding, and your being the nephew and son-in-law of the Prophet will all give you the right to the khilafat." Hearing this, there was no end to Ali's rage. He angrily claimed, "Allah, Allah! O Muhajireen! Do not take the office of the Prophet from his house and put it into your own homes. You must honor your Ahl Bayt, family of the Prophet, and give them the rights befitting their status. O Muhajireen! By Allah! We are the rightful owners of the Khilafat because we are the Ahl Bayt. We will be the rightful owners as long as there are amongst us reciters and scholars of the Quran, scholars of the Prophet's Sunnah, and just and upright leaders. By Allah, all these characteristics are within me, so do not become a follower of your own desires and follow a misled path rather than Allah's path. Do not go astray." According to narrators, Bashir ibn Sa'd was also present at this occasion. When he heard these words of Ali, he said, "O Ali! If the Ansar had heard these before they pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr, they would not have pledged allegiance to anyone except you." After this discussion, Ali went home in a fit of rage. At night, he sat Fatima on a mule and took her to the Ansar. As they went from house to house, Fatima would beseech help from the Ansar. But everywhere they went, they were met with the same reply, "O daughter of the Holy Prophet! We have already pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr. If your husband had come to us before, we surely would have pledged allegiance to him instead." Hearing this, Ali would angrily reply, "What, should I have left the body of the Holy Prophet without performing any funeral rites or ceremony, to fight and argue for succeeding him?" Fatima would also say Ali did exactly what was appropriate. As for what the others did, Allah will surely bring them to account for their actions. Same, 122-25. Hakel has related these events from various references. On this topic, Bukhari provides the following narration. Fatima stayed alive for 6 months after the Prophet's death. When she died, Ali buried her alone and even prayed the funeral prayer alone, without informing Abu Bakr. While Fatima was alive, Ali held a certain dignity in the eyes of the people. But after her death, Ali felt their attitudes had changed and therefore, he finally decided to reconcile with Abu Bakr and to pledge his allegiance to him. So he sent a message to Abu Bakr requesting him to meet him at his house. Ali was not unaware of the fact that Abu Bakr may bring Umar along, and therefore asked Abu Bakr to come alone. At this, Umar said no. "By Allah, you cannot go to meet him alone." Abu Bakr replied, "What do you think? What can he do to me? By Allah, I will definitely go to him." So Abu Bakr went to his house and Ali spoke with him and said, "I now recognize your excellence and what favors Allah has graced you with, and I am not jealous of any of them. But, in the matter of khilafat, you have dealt unjustly with me. I felt that because of my closeness to the Prophet, I should have a part in the khilafat." After Zuhr, Abu Bakr got up on the podium and gave a speech describing the circumstances and reasoning behind Ali's change of heart. Then he prayed for forgiveness, and after that, Ali read his speech and praised Abu Bakr's virtues. He said, "Whatever I have done until now, was not because of any jealousy towards Abu Bakr, nor did I reject his God-given excellence and virtues, but rather I felt that I had a part in the khilafat, and that Abu Bakr had dealt with me unjustly, and because of that, we were bitter in our hearts. Bukhari, Book of Skirmishes. From this narration of Bukhari's, we note a few points worthy of great scrutiny. 1. Ali was so upset with Abu Bakr that he did not even give him notice of Fatima's death and secretly buried her during the night. 2. While Fatima was alive, Ali refused to pledge to Abu Bakr. But right after her death, he felt that in the eyes of the people, he did not have the same prestige as before, and therefore felt it prudent to simply pledge to Abu Bakr. 3. To prove his right to the Caliphate, Ali claimed that he was the closest by relation to the Prophet. Just think Saleem. If we consider these reports from history to be true, then what picture is painted of the great Sahaba, Ali? According to history, Ali accused those people who kept him from the Caliphate of snatching it away from him unjustly. This is the very crime upon which Shia Muslims base their belief that after the death of the Prophet, except for the few Sahaba who did not pledge to Abu Bakr, the rest all became apostates. In response to this, Sunnis say that this belief is prejudiced. But what reply can they give when the following narration is contained within their own most reliable book of hadith, Sahih al-Bukhari? Ibn Abbas relates that the Prophet said,
كما بدأنا أول خلق نعيده وعدا علينا إنا كنا فاعلين.
Naked, without circumcision, you will be gathered. The Prophet then read the ayah Kama Badana Awala Kalkan Nuidu wa Wadan Alena Inakuna Failin. 21:104, and on the day of judgment, the first who will be clothed will be Ibrahim. And on that day some of my companions will be taken to the left side, towards hell. I will say, these are my companions. Then Allah will say that these people reverted to their old religion ever since you left their midst. The actual word Bukhari uses is murtad, apostate. Then I will say as the pious servant of Allah, Jesus, said,
وكنت عليهم شهيدا ما دمت فيهم فلما توفيتني كنت أنت الرقيب عليهم.
And I was a witness over them while I dwelt amongst them, but when you took me up, you were the watcher over them and you are a witness to all things. If you punish them, they are your slaves, and if you forgive them, verily only you are the Almighty, the All-Wise. 5:117. Bukhari, Book of the Prophets 1406. Just think Saleem. How this hadith of Bukhari takes the discussion to a new low. These are those companions regarding which the Quran declares
أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا.
that these are the true believers. 874. If the iman of even those believers was such that as soon as the Prophet turned his head, their iman wavered and broke, then what can we expect of others? And if any critic should say, and they certainly do, that a tree is known by its fruits, then think what kind of picture is painted of our beloved Prophet. At this point, the question must be boiling in your heart that if this is the condition of history, then why is it not rejected or revised? Why is it forbidden to do such a thing? This is a very logical thought, and there should not be any hesitation carrying out this task. But the problem is that our history was sanctified and put into the position of religious doctrine. The belief regarding these narrations is that they were divinely revealed to the Prophet through unrecited revelation, wahi ger matlu. Not only that, but there is also a belief that if there is any discrepancy between the Quran and the Hadith, then that item in the Quran should be considered obsolete or replaced, and the Hadith should receive precedence. One of Karachi's religious organizations, Tahqiq-e-Haq, printed a pamphlet entitled Fitna-e-Inkari Hadith, The Corruption of the Rejection of Hadith, written by Allama Hafiz Muhammad Ayyub Sahib Delwi. He writes, "It is wrong to claim that Fakam Bainahum Bima Anzalala means the Prophet is being told to govern Muslims only according to the Book of Allah, and therefore, the Prophet did not give us anything else to govern by. Ma Anzalala does not mean only the Quran, rather it means the Quran as well as the Hadith." Page 20. After this, he writes that if the words of the Prophet are against the Quran, then the Prophet's words should take precedence. To prove this, he states that in verse 280, Allah says,
كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت إن ترك خيرا الوصية للوالدين والأقربين بالمعروف حقا على المتقين.
It is prescribed when death approaches any of you, if he leave any goods, that he make a bequest to parents and next of kin. According to reasonable usage, this is due from the God-fearing. But the Prophet in a famous hadith has said La wasiyata lil warith, that a will cannot be made for one's family/successors, they can only receive the estate through fixed inheritance laws. From many sources it is established that action has been taken according to this hadith. So this shows how the words of the Prophet should take precedence over the words of the Quran. Page 80. After this, he writes, now if one does not understand how it is possible that the Prophet's words could be against the Quran and that his words could supersede those of the Quran, one should first remember that the Prophet's words were not his own. Rather, they were the words of Allah. The same way that the Quran is the words of Allah, the Prophet's words are actually the words of Allah. And in the same way that one verse of the Quran can override another verse, one type of Allah's words, Prophet's hadith, can supersede another type of Allah's words, Quran. Page 86. Saleem, I previously said that we should take the piles of history from the 1st century, the era of the Prophet and those with him, and test that against the criteria of the Quran. Those items that are in accordance with the Quran can be kept, whereas those that are against its values and principles should be rejected. In response to this, Hafiz Ayyub states, in the same way that it is not necessary for Allah's words to be according to logic in order for us to affirm them as true, it is also not necessary for the Prophet's words to be according to the Quran in order for us to accept them. That is because the Prophet's words are also the words of Allah, and the Quran is also the words of Allah. So it is not necessary for Allah's words that there be no variation, just as it is not necessary that his one action be a result of another action. On the one hand, the mountain's top reaches towards the skies, and on the other hand, its valley reaches way far below the earth. In the same way that his one action does not have to be according to another action, his one word, in the hadith, does not have to be according to another, in the Quran. Page 51. There is a hadith recorded in Kitabat-Tawdi wa Talwi, page 480, that states that the Prophet said after me, there will be many hadiths ascribed to me. So if any hadith is narrated to you, test it against the Quran. If it is according to it, then accept the hadith, if it is not, then reject it. There can be no doubt about the validity of this hadith, because it is exactly according to the teaching of the Quran. And none of the Prophet's words or commands could ever be against the teachings of the Quran. But Saleem, do you know what these scholars claim when hearing this hadith? The group Ali Hadith's monthly magazine Rahiq in its April 1958 issue claimed that this hadith was introduced by heretics, and these hadiths now are being propagated by fools who have plagiarized their ideas from heretics. Imam Katabi, Zafar al-Mani ala Muqtasar al-Jarjani, page 267, says in regard to this hadith, those heretics and enemies of hadith introduced this fabricated narration for the purpose of disproving hadith and to create chaos in the religion and religious system. This hadith is refuted by the Prophet's own words that I have been given the Quran and something similar to it. Only hadith is similar to the Quran because in another narration it is said that the hadith are similar to the Quran. Zafar al-Mani page 267, and Dari page 140 volume 1. Note the above hadith in question simply asks that hadiths at least be tested against the Quran before acceptance. Why are these scholars so scared of doing that? The above scholar, for a total of 1009 pages, explained why the hadith should not be refuted. Imam Katabi, Imam Shafi, Imam al-Muhaddith and Abdur Rahman ibn Mahdi etc. also claim this hadith was introduced by heretics. Imam Baihaqi claims that any hadith made to be presented before the Quran is false. Allama Mistami writes if a narrator of hadith does this, he will be a forsaken denier of hadith, Majmu'-e-Zizawaid vol 1 page 68. So according to these individuals, the belief that whatever is according to the Quran is right and whatever is against the Quran is wrong was introduced by heretics and apostates. Given the above references, Saleem, it must be evident to you that certain things are contained in our books of hadith and history that 1. Are against the teachings of the Quran. 2. Malign the character of our Prophet. 3. Malign the character of our companions. 4. Are even against common sense and wisdom. After considering this, the following questions must rise in your mind. 1. How did these things appear in our books? 2. For 1,000 years, why have these things been passed down? In other words, why didn't people remove these things? 3. Why do there continue to be groups engrossed in forcing the acceptance of these things? These questions should arise in the heart of any person who takes his life seriously, with wisdom, and reflects deeply upon this matter. The first two questions, how did these things appear and why weren't they removed, require a detailed discussion, and the proper time for that is when we inspect and revise our entire history from scratch. An abbreviated form of this is contained in Shakari Risalat. It's obvious that there isn't room for this in one letter. For now, I'd like to present an explanation as to why there is such a push, even today, to make people accept these things. This point can be clarified by an anecdote. But before that, I find it necessary to tell you a few things. Saleem, you know that I am not associated with any religious denomination or political party, nor am I involved with any other group. That is why, as you may have noticed, I have written very little regarding individuals. But occasionally, in certain situations it becomes necessary for me to mention names. Now listen closely to this. About 2 years ago, some authorities of Jamaat-e-Islami separated to form their own group. These individuals presented a very compelling reason for their separation. They claimed that in the initial stages of the Jamaat-e-Islami, certain principles were proclaimed as a necessary part of the Islamic system. But after the establishment of the group and its inception as an active force, some of those principles were ignored and even discarded. You can find details in Al-Munir Lailpur, January 31, 1958 and Tolu-e-Islam, March and July 1958. It is obvious that this objection was sound and the crime was serious. But the leader of Jamaat-e-Islami, Maulana Maududi, claimed this was not an extraordinary action, and that even the Prophet himself, Na'ayathubillah, after the establishment and active implementation of Islam, bent the rules and values that he presented during the initial invitational period of Islam. For example, amongst the various principles of the Islamic system was a movement to wipe out race and family as a means of discrimination amongst people, differentiating them only on the basis of piety. After eliminating all such factors, Islam unites mankind into one brotherhood and calls them to one message and one truth. This has been espoused in the Quran many times. The Prophet not only proclaimed this message with his tongue, but also in action by attempting to free slaves and give them equality. But when the issue of the leadership of the entire nation arose, he changed his tune, claiming Al-Imam min Quraysh. The leaders shall only be from the tribe of Quraysh. Maududi goes on to claim that any person can see that this declaration was directly against the original basic principle. This, according to Maududi, shows how even the Prophet bent and changed rules as he wished. Did you see that, Saleem? How the leader of the Jamaat-e-Islami took advantage of this one falsely inserted hadith that has been written down in our history books. Obviously, if only the Quran was considered the source of proof and reference, then these kinds of leaders would have no evidence to support their fraudulent claims. But unfortunately, history has been taken as the source of proof and reference, in some cases equal to or even more important than the Quran. Every imaginable account and story can be found in it, and every action or decision can be justified through it. But those separating from the Jamaat, in response, argued. Brothers, please reflect on this matter. Imagine that the last Prophet of Allah had acted this way, and the Islamic movement emulated the Prophet's example and acted this way, and every group standing for the establishment of the Islamic system acted this way, that after the Islamic system was finally actively implemented, its leader reserved the right to change or make exceptions to the principles and values under which people were initially rallied, with the exception of fundamental principles such as Tawhid and prophethood. If those leaders annulled, at their discretion, whatever guarantees and promises they made to the people during the initial stages that they now deemed harmful to their cause, then what is the difference between these Islamic movements and those fortune-seeking politicians with corrupt political campaigns? For the achievement of power they present very pure and lofty ideals and make very beautiful promises to the public, and on that basis, they gather the public's trust and confidence. But as soon as they establish power, in order to maintain their power, they go back on their ideals and promises. In response to this, the leader of Jamaat-e-Islami goes on to say that for the important purpose of establishing the deen, making exceptions to and bending the rules is one thing, but even lying for that cause is not only permissible, rather it is necessary. He says that in Islam, truthfulness and plain dealing is a very important principle and lying is looked upon as evil, but in real life matters sometimes it becomes necessary to lie. Not only is permission given for this, but in certain cases, it has been determined in Islamic duty by fatwa, legal ruling. Tarjuman al-Quran, May 1958. You must be shocked by how these people dare to make such claims, and what kind of proof they can give to support their claims. But from that same history from which they presented their first proof, they find their second proof as well. And so they presented a few hadiths supporting the duty of lying, amongst which Asma bint Yazid relates from the Prophet that lying is not permissible except in 3 cases. When a man talks to a woman in order to woo her, in war, and to repair relations between people. Tirmidhi. And then they go on, Nayothabila, to present examples from the Prophet's Uswa-e Hasana, perfect example, in proof of their claims. In their words. Practical examples of this are found in Hadith. When the Prophet asked Muhammad ibn Muslim to murder Ka'b ibn Ashraf, he asked the Prophet, if it becomes necessary then may I lie? And the Prophet in clear words gave him permission to do so. Bukhari. I hope you now understand why these gentlemen are so eager to make everyone accept such history and narrations as an unchangeable part of Islam. It's obvious that, as has been said before, if the Quran is the only source of proof and we reject any narrated history of the first century of Islam that is against the Quran, then no one will find an Islamic proof for their lies and deceptions. History can only be abused when it is brought into religion, sanctified, and made to be accepted as an authority to justify one's decisions and declarations. I do not mean to say that every single person accepted and made others accept this history for these devious ends. Most of them, in fact, wholeheartedly and sincerely believe that all these things are true. Purely believing in something with sincerity and wholeheartedness is not a proof of that belief's truth. There are many idol worshippers who worship idols with the utmost sincere intentions, but this fact does not make idol worshipping right. After centuries of accepting these beliefs on the basis of taqlid, blind following, people's ability to think for themselves has slowly withered away. They even claim critical thinking and reflection is not permitted in religious matters, claiming that whatever has been accepted is what is right. There is no room for criticism. These people believe they are doing a great service to Islam by protecting these items. But that does not stop the selfish from taking advantage of these beliefs, and in fact, they are the ones who initiated these beliefs and inserted them into our history. They are the ones who have propagated these beliefs for centuries, and they are its biggest supporters today. Listen to this example. In the beginning, I mentioned that in the Islamic system, no one can store extra wealth. Rather, it should be pooled together for the general betterment and improvement of the nation and mankind at large. In regards to this, the Quran is so clear, precise, and frank that there isn't even room for alternative interpretations. It is also evident that the period of the Prophet peace be upon him operated under such guidelines. But after this, when the Caliphate was turned into a monarchy and capitalism was solidly established, it became necessary to create proofs and authorities justifying these changes in the Islamic system. Of course, they could not derive this from the Quran because it is an unchangeable and protected book. So they devised a clever scheme to insert whatever ideas they wished through the back door of history. And so, they inserted deceptive stories claiming that huge estates, landlords and the capitalist system were the sunnah of the Prophet or the precedent of the Sahaba. For example, in one narration Ibn Abbas relates that the revelation of Ayah 9:34-35 had a strong effect on the Muslims.
والذين يكنزون الذهب والفضة ولا ينفقونها في سبيل الله فبشرهم بعذاب أليم.
O you who believe! There are indeed many among the priests and anchorites who in falsehood devour the wealth of men and hinder them from the way of Allah. And there are those who hoard gold and silver and spend it not in the way of Allah. Announce unto them a most grievous chastisement. On the day when it will be heated in the fire of hell and used to brand their foreheads, their flanks, and their backs. This is the treasure you hoarded for yourself, taste the treasures you hoarded. Meaning that they thought this command was rather costly and excessive. Umar calmed the other Muslims saying, I will relieve you of your concerns regarding this. And so he went to the Prophet and said, O Prophet, this verse is rather weighty on your Sahaba. The Prophet replied, Zakat was made mandatory on Muslims to purify their remaining wealth, and inheritance was made mandatory to spread your wealth amongst your successors. Upon hearing this, Umar joyfully exclaimed, Allahu Akbar. After this the Prophet said, let me tell you a very good thing that a man can collect which will make him very happy, and that is a good woman. If the man looks at her, his heart feels content, and when he gives her an order, she obeys, and when he is not present she takes care of his children and his wealth. Abu Daud. Misat Vol 1, page 309. This narration resounds through and through that it was fabricated. Can even the thought occur to a Muslim that Allah makes an order that is too hard for the Sahaba? And then, none other than Umar, renowned for his strict and steadfast character, goes to the Prophet in order to get the order repealed? And then the Prophet changes the order such that as long as you pay 2.5% of your wealth every year, then it is permissible for you to hoard piles of silver and gold? Inspection of this narration can only lead us to believe that it was fabricated at a time when such a hadith was needed to corrupt the government of Allah. But since the current capitalist system gains support from this narration, those with self-interests declare it as the utmost truth. And when one objects, claiming that these teachings are against the Quran, he is silenced by the response, "Do you understand the Quran better, or did the Prophet peace be upon him and Sahaba?" Since the purpose of this letter was not to summarize all of Islamic history, I will conclude having given the above examples. Now, bring to mind once again the history of choosing the first Khalifa that has been described in our books of hadith and other scholarly works, and then consider that if we accept this history as being true, then what dignity will Muslims and Islam have in this world, and what kind of chaos would be unleashed if Muslims attempt to follow that holy precedent? The real question is what can be done to rectify the situation. The answer is simple. 1. Our iman is that the Quran is Allah's book, in its original pristine form right down to the letter. 2. The Prophets and the Sahaba's lives were lived according to the Quran. 3. Therefore, if historical accounts claim things that are against Quranic teaching or that malign the Prophet or Sahaba, then without hesitation we should declare those accounts as false. Whether those accounts are in a book of hadith or in any other book. 4. In light of the above principles, we should compile a new history of that period. That history should illuminate in what way the Quran was put into action by the Muslims of that period. 5. After the blessed initial period of Islam, the Islamic system was corrupted. So the history we have of that latter period to this day is likely the true history of Muslims. This history cannot be called a true representation of Islam, nor can it be used as a proof or authority in Islam, nor is it worth our time to spend our energy in its defense.
تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت ولكم ما كسبتم ولا تسألون عما كانوا يعملون.
We are not obligated to anything more than acknowledging that these are they who have passed on. 141. 6. As far as understanding the Quran is concerned, it is not subservient to outside historical information. It can be understood in any time period. In the Islamic system, the Quran is the only authority and precedent, and only it is the measure of good or evil, and right or wrong. Whatever is according to it is the truth, and whatever is against it is wrong. Until we take the above principles into action, we cannot establish the true Islamic system. So did you understand, Saleem? What history's true position and value is and how we should deal with it? Take care, my friend. G. Parwez, June 1959.